So for the last several months, I've been kind of joking around the idea of Cyberpunk 2077 finding its way into the Game Awards. Specifically, I was joking about it going into the Game of the Year nominations, just the overall best game of 2021. I figured it would cause a lot of controversy and make things kind of interesting over the next couple of weeks as we head into the show. Well, Cyberpunk did not make it into the Game of the Year nominations, unfortunately. I'll be going over all of that tomorrow morning in Newswave, and we'll kind of take a look at the different categories. I might skip over some like esports stuff, but for the most part, we'll go over the major categories. But Cyberpunk 2077 did actually get nominated. That's right. And we're going to go over here today because it's not really in a category even I was expecting. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So, if you had to take a guess, which category do you think that Cyberpunk was nominated for? Because there are quite a few. I mean, they have more categories seemingly every single year. And there are typically a few that people care about. For the most part, like 5 or 6 maybe. But we end up with like 20 or so categories. Well, if you said best role-playing game, you're correct. And I know it sounds weird because you look at what it's next to. Monster Hunter Rise, Scarlet Nexus, Shin Megami Tensei 5, and Tales of Arise. To me, those 4 games make sense for Best RPG of 2021. They're all high-quality games, and for the most part, they're games that reviewed well enough. I mean, Scarlet Nexus, I think people will look at and say, okay, it's like right there on the edge, but I think looking at something like a Tales of Arise or a Shin Megami Tensei 5 or a Monster Hunter Rise, yes, they are some of the best-rated RPGs that are at least known well enough to get nominated from the different judges and outlets that voted for this. Cyberpunk 2077 is the one that's kind of the outlier here, right? I guess you can make the case that Cyberpunk 2077 has deeper mechanics when it comes to building up your character, progressing, kind of playing into the role-playing genre. But still, it does play more like, I guess, a Fallout, and that's kind of how they're viewing it, where there is a lot going on under the hood outside of just shooting. Like, it's an action game, yes, but there are a lot of dice rolls technically going on in the background as you're playing. However, when I look at this list, I realize something like Bravely Default 2 was left out to make room for Cyberpunk 2077. I figured this was going to happen somewhere in the Game Awards. I mentioned for Game of the Year, just again, joking around, they might leave out Deathloop, or they might leave out Ratchet & Clank or Metroid Dread to get Cyberpunk in there. No, instead, for Best Role-Playing Game, they've kind of worked in Cyberpunk 2077 in place of something like a Bravely Default 2, which sure came out towards the beginning of this year. That was in like February, but it was a high-quality JRPG. I don't know if people maybe forgot about it and they looked at something like Cyberpunk and said that belongs there instead. It's just interesting that Cyberpunk 2077 launched at the end of last year. It missed the cutoff for the Game Awards in 2020, had that massive, disastrous launch, right, that we all are very familiar with right now. But it still sold nearly 14 million copies the first time they reported. I'm sure many, many more copies since then. I am waiting for them to tell us that it sold over 20 million copies or something so that everyone can just question everything we're doing here. But seeing Cyberpunk 2077 in the Game Awards, to me, I think I understand it from even Jeff's perspective, because if you think about it this way, he could technically bring in Keanu Reeves because, like, Cyberpunk 2077 is nominated for something, and he could present an award or something like that, and they can put, as you see right here, Keanu Reeves' character model right on the front of the best role-playing category. Like, literally, that's the first game you see right there. There's Keanu Reeves. Now, we do also have to remember that Jeff Keighley does not handpick these nominations. It's split up through a bunch of different outlets who turn in their own nominations. I believe they're all tallied, and then at the end of it, we come out with a certain number of games that were voted for the most to be in these categories, like role-playing game of the year. I don't think Cyberpunk 2077 is going to win. If I had to pick one from this category specifically, I think Tales of Arise will take it. It hasn't sold as well as something like Monster Hunter Rise. In fact, I don't even think it reviewed as highly as Monster Hunter Rise, but it seemed like it was a resurgence for the Tales series overall. It's a very high-quality game. Visually, it's very impressive to see that from Bandai. And I think for the most part, it's a game that a lot of people will gravitate towards voting for. Now, we also can't discount the possibility that Cyberpunk 2077 could win this thing here. There is a lot that goes into it when it comes down to voting. I think it's split up so many different ways. But the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 somehow found its way into best role-playing over something like a Bravely Default 2, yeah, it makes me think it's possible. I don't think it's very likely, to be honest. Not when you have higher quality games in this category. And it's strange that it's there in the first place, but let me know what you guys think about Cyberpunk 2077 being nominated for Best Role-Playing Game of the Year. Did you expect it? And are you surprised to see Cyberpunk anywhere near these awards? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.